more professional. I really wasn't thinking I should have changed.
Friday evening. I mean, anything goes.
Well, I'm meeting some friends. Oh, actually, you're welcome to join as well. But I'm meeting some of my friends at a bar in Northern Virginia. And it's not too far away from here. Like right after this. Like around 8. Where is it? It's in Courthouse. It's not Courthouse. It's not far.
Yeah, you know what? So we're going to stay here?
Yes, yes. So we have altogether like 2 hours.
Perfect.
We start like this. If you want to sit so that it will be more convenient for you, for you too. Then but we start here. We start here so that I can introduce you formally.
Very nice.
So
Like this.
Yes. And we all need to speak in the microphones because it's broadcasted on YouTube.
So we're not off the record.
Well, no.
We're on the record.
Dear friends, let's start. Thank you very much for coming today. We have an unusual topic. As you know, we here at Free Peoples of Russia national think tanks, and that's one of them. You know, it's about what's going on with new technologies in Ukraine. What are the strengths and weaknesses? What are the lessons learned from Ukraine's resistance from the military point of view? And that's why we have a fantastic and outstanding speaker today with us, Rear Admiral Michael HEWITT, our good friend. Mike is currently the founder of IP3 International, the company that does a lot of international development of new technologies, in particular in energy space and in defense technologies, obviously. Previously, Michael had an outstanding career in U.S. Navy. I think it's in your family. It was even your father was a naval aviator, and you yourself was in the same thing. So he combines both the Navy and aviation experience, which is extremely useful for us in the defense industry. Michael was in charge of reconnaissance activities and Joint Chief of Staff. So again, everything that is so important for Ukraine these days, Admiral HEWITT had first-hand experience. That's why please welcome Michael HEWITT. So the way we will work, I will start with a small presentation. I hope it would be small, you know, about what's going on right now in Ukraine in terms of technologies. You know, what is this drones industry that so many people are talking about, how it emerged, and what state it is right now. Then we move to dialogue with Michael. and we will talk about how this experience can be applied to the United States and United States military, and what prevents and what are the bottlenecks and what's the problems of Ukrainian ecosystem and what's are the opportunities. And then, as always, we open floor to questions. So we're supposed to work as usual until 8 p.m. But we think about questions, you know, so we would like to have them interesting. So let's start with the presentation. So it's working. Yeah. So firstly, some videos. This is what was the first successful application of drones in Ukraine. It's a naval boat. This particular boat is called Magura. And these boats are responsible to sinking 1/3 of Russian Black Sea fleet. Because of these boats, Russian Navy had to evacuate its fleet away from Crimea and put it in Novorossiysk. That's all because of these units. And what you see on this picture is that the boats originally started as just the boats. Right now they can carry anti-aircraft missiles, and for the first example, when there were 2 Russian fighter jets downed in Novorossiysk, was like 2-3 months ago. And they can also work as the mothership, so they can carry other drones on themselves. So this technology we started as a very simple one is right now very actively developing. That's the actual video on the attack of Admiral Makarov frigate. Basically, just only a Russian ship which was sank not with the drones was Moscow cruiser. That was the one which was sank with Neptune missiles. All the rest were with the marine drones. Let's move to air drones. That's a famous Baba Yaga drone, which one of the most feared in the Russian military. This Nemesis Unit 412 is the first unit of unmanned system forces. I will talk about this military unit later. So what he mentioned actually is very interesting phenomena that originally the biggest prize for both Russian and Ukrainian army was to hit a particular tank or, you know, something like serious. Right now they're hunting primarily for other drone operators. Okay, I think that like let's move forward. The details on how these units operate we can discuss later. So I will start with the very basic things, you know, about what are drones in general. So they are autonomous, remotely controlled, unmanned systems which can do both military and civilian tasks. They can do a lot of different things. They can not just attack. They can observe. They can track. They can deliver. They can be used for communications. They can use for many other different purposes. In particular, in the military applications, we see right now that drones are way more efficient than traditional human military personnel, because they can do a lot of different things that humans can do. But most importantly, obviously, is that drones significantly decrease losses in the army. And basically, it is the drones that resulted in the current equilibrium at the front in Ukraine, when nobody is moving anywhere, and if one side wants to move like Russian side is trying, it results, you know, in outstanding human losses. In general, the tasks that are being assigned to drones are very different, not just military. So it's different video, photos. You know, many people from you probably used DJI Mavics. You know, they're very popular. You know, make movies. There are special now devices when you can just walk and the guy just flies next to you. You know, picturing of what you do. So there are a lot of toys like this. You know about the projects that are happening in the United States and in other countries, like Amazon is developing a system of delivery by drone, air delivery of different products, and the FAA right now is making a legal framework so to make it available in all of the country. Obviously, a lot of different tasks that are related to observation. In Ukraine, for example, the original application of drones was not military, it was in farming, in agriculture, when they were controlling the vegetation, when they were controlling the harvesters which were moving across the fields, all this type of things, and they were there at least 5 years before the large-scale invasion, so it's not something new. In several countries, drones already used for the traffic control, obviously different communication tasks, entertainment purposes, you name it. Actually, the drones appeared very long time ago, basically almost at the same time when traditional aircraft. The first one was in 1896. So it's 130 years old technology, and many things that we see right now in Ukraine are basically not so much different from that bird that you see at the top picture. Just the communication unit is totally different. Optics is totally different. You know, the control devices are totally different. But the avionics is very much the same. And obviously, the military application was always the main driver. Basically, there were attempts to use unmanned aircraft during World War I. It was not so popular because you could use men, and it was more efficient. The remote control was not available, but nevertheless, the first mass-produced drone, air drone, UAV, was emerging during World War I. It was called the catering bug. The famous V1 of Germany during World War II is also a drone. It's again very much the same as what Ukraine is producing right now, and obviously it's famous. It's played a lot of role in the bombardment of Great Britain, etc. Currently, the military producers turn to develop drones and to use them already for a long time, and there was already some craziness in how they would replace manpower, but they tend to replace traditional aircrafts. And even what we saw in the procurement of US military until recently, they basically were looking how to replace the traditional jet fighter or a traditional submarine. Just without a person. So they were not talking about something different, just the same thing, but without human beings. In Russian-Ukrainian war, the approach was different because they were derived from the civilian drones. The original drones that were used at Russian-Ukraine wars, the war was those DJI Mavics with a grenade, just with a scotch tape, linked to it and made as a kamikaze drone. Only later it became something specific. And right now, drones are being used in combat for attack purposes. They are being used in patrol, not as a kamikaze, but for safeguarding a certain perimeter and watching out the potential threats. They are being used as interceptors against other drones and against other air hazards. They are used to detect suspicious activity. They are used for special operations, counter-terror and law enforcement. And, this soldiers, for wounded soldiers, are being delivered with drones. It's actually working. And obviously, drones become a very important deterrence factor. The knowledge that the enemy uses a lot of drones prevents the adversary from advancing in a certain direction. And very interesting thing is what is very intuitive for many. In the modern war, and this number is not changing for quite a while already, to kill one enemy soldier, you need to spend, in average, 200,000 bullets. Obviously, most of them are being shot just in the air. So that's the actual ratio, which is not changing, I believe, from Vietnam War. Admiral would probably correct me if I am wrong. That means that if we take $1 per bullet, so that means that each kill costs $200,000. As cynical as it sounds, but the math here obviously matters. Alternatively, one life of the enemy soldier can be taken with 10 average artillery shells. again, that's the actual number. If one shell is $3,000 to $4,000 each, that means it comes to $30,000 per kill. In the drones war, in average, it's being spent 2 drones to get an enemy soldier. The current cheap drones, which are approximately 2. Million. Of night. So actually 7 brigades can be destroyed in just one night. That's why in the modern day Ukraine war, you would not see tanks anymore. They're just not being used. You know, we are not talking about neither T-90s advancing at the field, nor Abramses, nor Leopards. They just take as far away from the field as possible because they are being wasted, you know, within several hours when they approach the actual battlefield. The same. Just 2 years ago, in the Russian army were because of the artillery fire. Right now, artillery accounts for approximately 9% of the losses. 80% of the losses in the Russian army is because of Ukrainian drones. So that's the math, and that basically reflects the nature of the future military conflict, which is asymmetrical. The great power against small countries, small groups. United States obviously is not ready for this kind of battle, because before, you know, it could project its force remotely without in the physical confrontation. With the application of drones, we will very soon see when a lot of these terrorist groups, you know, small countries would have very inexpensive weapons, which would very efficiently deter the great powers. Also a little bit of like educational materials about the market segments for the drones. They are being distinguished by size. So there are mass market drones, small drones, below $5,000 each. And they can go up to heavy equipment, which can project the power globally and which can cost millions and even tens of millions of dollars. Then they are being distinguished by distance. So there are very short range drones which are acting within 10 kilometers at the front lines, mid-range 10 to 50 kilometers, and global, you know, can be anywhere in the world. Right now, Ukraine, for example, has drones which can go as far away as 3,000 kilometers or 2,000 miles. Then type of drones. The most popular right now, the most mass market drones are FPVs, first person view. You know, the ones that you navigate with the glasses, virtual reality. They are being remotely controlled, and the pilot, just like autonomous, pre-programmed, so a certain route. Drones are fully autonomous. There is an AI, you know, when they're being just launched, and then they decide for themselves what they're gonna do. And obviously many people raise, and very legitimately, a lot of ethical concerns about this, because then nobody knows what kind of decision that they actually gonna take, whom they're gonna attack. And lastly, the differentiation is in the medium where they operate. It can be a air copter with rotors, it can be fixed wing, also air. They both are classified as unmanned air systems. Then it can be a marine unmanned sea vessel, USV, and then it can be it can be a submersible, also USV, and then it can be a land UGV drone, which is like a remotely controlled tank, so to say. So. If I may, like, to finish, then, and yeah. I would not stop here for a long time. I wanted to demonstrate the whole technology stack, which is right now available in Ukraine. So Ukraine produces all the different type of UAVs, USVs, you know, long range, short range, motherships, submersible, ground vehicles, as well as a lot of technologies which are supporting the drones war. And that are smart mines, that are drones which are sleeping on the ground, which wake up when the enemy approach them, different sensors, detectors, fortification tools. Radio electronic warfare obviously is one of the most critically important factors on the field. Very important is the software that manages the battlefield and which actually coordinates using of different drones, different telecommunication tools, as well as the different radars, lasers right now is being developed very actively, optics and so on, and so forth. So what's currently happening in the Ukrainian tech industry, and that's the last portion of my presentation. Ukraine now has more than 6,000 companies which are producing different defense technologies. Collectively, they have approximately 5 billion US in revenues. As much as it sounds, it's less than 1% of the global defense market, but that's a game changer at the field of battle. More than a dozen companies in Ukraine, and here is no official data, it's just my observations, but more than a dozen for sure, could be 24 companies, have already revenues which are above $100 million. So they are not small. All of them obviously differentiated. They have a battleground experience, and what also makes them separate is very short feedback loop. They're extremely agile. They change the technology literally every day, which is absolutely not typical for the defense industry in general, and that's their advantage, which sometimes turns into a disadvantage. I will talk about this later. The talent in Ukraine is very motivated, obviously, because of the war, and in terms of the cost of this talent, we can debate whether it's so cheap or not, but it's definitely extremely motivated, and that's why they achieve a lot of great results. Price performance ratio anyway is definitely the best in the market. And what's actually crowned this whole industry is that Ukraine became the first country in the war to create a special type of military forces, which is called unmanned system forces. Guess what was the second country which did the same? Russia. Yeah, but they're so much lagging behind. They announced creation of these forces a year and a half ago. So far, they didn't finish creation of this military directorate which would supervise these forces. In Ukraine, It's very well known. It's developing rapidly. Right now, the objective is to bring its manpower to 5% of the combined manpower of armed forces of Ukraine. So it's not small, but nothing is so easy. And Ukraine defense industry experiences a lot of problems, and probably the problem number one is that as agile, as sophisticated, as capable those companies are, they still all, even those which have several hundred million in revenues, they are at the garage stage. It's, you know, sophisticated garages, but they have no corporate governance, no IP, no procedures, no standards, no nothing. It's the reverse side of necessity to be very quick in response to the needs of the war, but it's not how the traditional companies are being built, and that's what prevents them from international expansion. Wars require agility, while international customers always require very strict standards, certificates, compliance, etc., etc., etc. Production in Ukraine, for obvious reasons, for the outside customers, looks very unreliable, and many friends of mine, they lost a lot of equipment and a lot of their production capabilities because of missile strikes. They're regular. It's being repaired. It's not so expensive, but nevertheless, you know, in terms of the reliability of supplies, it's a very negative factor. Ukraine, until 1st of September, had their exports prohibited. And that was for a reason, because the position of the president was that how we can ask for international assistance if we're exporting arms, that's not logical, and that's why we better export nothing. Now he was convinced that, you know, Ukraine needs certain type of things, but can export different types of things, like those drones, and there was a new law passed by Верховная Rada. And since 1st of September, the main restriction is lifted, but it's still a long way. It's still a long way to go. From other side, the Western customers are not ready to buy internationally produced arms. Even countries with relaxed controls and rules, like, I don't know, Middle Eastern customers, they already say that, like, let's create at least a joint production at our on our territories to produce this kind of things. In the United States, it's the paramount problem. United States is just simply not buying any foreign arms at all, so it requires relocation of the companies to the United States if they want to sell something. And last but not least is that large companies like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, you know, others, they basically have a certain monopoly on the market, and they don't want any newcomers, which are the disruptors, to come to the market. It's very easy to see their authority. The current arms market is estimated in $600 billion US, and just 20 billion are being awarded to small and medium-sized business. All the rest goes into these big mammoths in the United States and in Europe. What is happening in Ukraine is about to disrupt this, but not everybody is so happy about this. Thank you very much. I would conclude on this. If you had a question, you know, you may ask, and then we'll start talking.
I wanted to ask, when you get to the large, heavy drones that can go 1,000 kilometers, what's the difference between that and a guided missile?
Well, number one difference is payload. Drones are relatively lightweight. The regular missile can carry half a ton of explosives. Drones usually 10 times less than this. But at the same time, usually such a missile is not being remotely controlled. Well, on the coordinates, yes, but not, you know, visually, and many drones are. So they can be they can adjust their hit as they fly.
They're scanning on the ground.
Yeah.
Thank you. And second question, real quick. What is the level of drone production, would you say, number of units?
Ukraine currently produces approximately 4.5 million drones a year. To be compared with the US production at 50,000 drones a year. So that's plus minus the difference. But obviously most of this production is in the very small FPV drones because they are the expendables at the field. They are like loitering munition type, you know, they're like shells, you know, they have been spent all the time. They're actually cheaper than shells. Hmm? Yeah, good question. Thank you very much for asking this. There are companies in Ukraine which achieved independence from Chinese parts. There are. But the thing is that production without Chinese parts becomes more expensive and less efficient at the same time. And like, you know, most advanced looking companies, they have a certain warehouses of the spare parts, the components, so that if China decides to stop exporting to Ukraine, that we can switch to South Korea or to Taiwan or to other locations. But there is no reason to do it because it would, right now, it just decreases the efficiency. And usually the dependency is with the rotors, the engines, and with batteries. And these are not very sophisticated pieces, so they are not reporting something to Beijing. It's not about the telecom equipment or the chips, you know, which are being usually bought elsewhere. So, yeah, just and let's go to the dialogue. Let's have the last. Also, thank you very much for a great question. The statistics on the Ukrainian side is slightly lower. It's more or less in the same numbers, but I believe it's like 70%. Because Ukraine does not disclose the statistics, so I can make just, you know, an educated guess. You know, with 80% on the Russian side, it's a clear information, but here I am guessing, but it's slightly lower. And the reason why it's slightly lower is because Russia can use the gliding bombs, you know, and this type of stuff which Ukraine doesn't have. So it can use just conventional airplanes also at the battlefield. And that changes the math a little bit. In terms of types of drones, Russia actually producing no less than Ukraine. It produces a lot. It's way less diverse because in Russia it's very much centrally controlled and driven by the Ministry of Defense and to certain businessmen with access to security forces, to like with connections to the military, etc. In Ukraine, it's a genuine ecosystem of private players. That's why it's more diverse. But there is also the downside. The downside is that it's less predictable, you know, and it's less stable and whatever. And that's why right now everybody in Ukraine is thinking what would happen if the ceasefire finally happens, you know, what would be with these companies, you know, that's why they start looking at the international diversification. So, Admiral, I am sorry that, you know, it took me so long.
It was a fantastic, fantastic presentation. Thank you.
My first question to you, we see that United States for a very long time was basically deaf to these new technologies. And even US drones producers like Admiral, Shield AI, and others, even they were struggling in delivering their technologies. But in this summer, Secretary Hexet came up with the idea, so we should turn to these new technologies. Do you yourself, as a military person, believe that it's a window of opportunity for Ukrainian companies, or whether it would stay in the United States only for the existing players?
Well, thank you, Ilya. And first, let me thank you for having the opportunity to be here. It's always an honor to be with Ilya, and I always learn so much myself from these great presentations. I'm actually quite envious. I was in the U.S. Navy for 31 years. I flew P-3 Orion, so I hunted Soviet submarines. I have maybe 2,000 hours on top of Soviet submarines with no kills, not even one torpedo dropped. He's killed more Russian military than all of the U.S. Navy in the history of the Cold War. So I'm quite envious
I
of
don't
that.
know if it is a compliment for me personally.
I'm quite proud to be a friend and just amazing. And we will get into these topics. I think they're so important, everything that you outlined. I will say the history of unmanned systems for the U.S. military, I actually designed the replacement for the P-3 Orion. If you're familiar with this airplane, we hunted Soviet submarines. It was a 4-engine turboprop airplane. And we decided to replace it. And so we designed a new airplane. It's actually a Boeing 737. But we also designed an unmanned system to offload many of the missions that could be done better with persistent high-altitude drones. So when I replaced the P-3 Orion with the P-8 Poseidon, we also we took a Global Hawk. And if you're familiar with Global Hawk, it was one of the first UAVs. The wingspan is larger than most commercial aircraft. It's a huge drone. But it didn't drop weapons. It flew at a very high altitude for long periods of time. So our progression into drones prior to Russia's invasion was quite different than yours. We became quite good in the war on terror with drones, with Predators and Reapers, and if you're familiar with those drones and taking out Al-Qaeda, we got pretty good at advancing the innovation against the threat. But we're nowhere near as good as Ukraine is in innovation, and the cycle of innovation to the war fighter and back is done in, I say this all the time, when you're fighting for your survival, you become very innovative very quickly. And in some ways, had Ukraine been under NATO rules and NATO procedures and EU rules and foreign military sale rules and what we call ITAR compliance rules, I'm not sure you would have been as effective as you are.
100%.
Because you were able to operate effectively without all of the obstructions to innovation was why you've been so successful. I'll also say that I think that, so I was in Odessa at the Black Sea Security Forum, and I was doing an interview with the media, and I was talking about how Ukraine was advancing in not just payload, but endurance and range and concept of operations around unmanned systems. And the very next day was when the Ukrainian attack deep in Russia happened and took out most of the Russian bomber fleet. And it was so innovative. And they said, you must have known. I said, I had no idea. But it was a demonstration of not just capability, but concept of operations. It was brilliant. So we all have a lot to learn from Ukraine, and we will. And many of the obstacles that you have outlined, we will overcome. My number one priority is to protect Ukraine's industrial base, protect Ukraine's IP, protect those companies that aren't companies, that have been so successful. And so we have to meet you halfway in reducing the barriers to entry for your companies to become, first must become companies, but we must protect their IP. And so I know Ilya and I have been working together on creating what I was calling a victory fund. And the victory fund would be non-traditional. It would primarily be debt or what we call safe agreements, so that we don't dilute the ownership or the ingenuity of the company. But our measure of effectiveness would be, if this drone, like Magura, is so successful, I want more of it. I don't need to have a good business case, or if it makes money, I just know that it's winning the war. And if it's winning the war, we want to scale it. And we'll worry about the other things later.
No, you're absolutely right. But still, we come into practical things. And as I mentioned during my presentation, before June this year, I saw just several announcements for bidding on behalf of DoD, and they all were for submersible drones. I wouldn't debate, how efficient they are. We are not having that many of them in Ukraine for a good reason. And the reason is obviously in communications, being able to remotely control them. And actually, it just, again, price performance, it doesn't make much sense. But because there was a request during this Lviv event last week, actually was presented the first, submersible, like, big stuff called Taloka. It's the drone which is sized this building, submersible, which looks like a submarine. I believe it's just to satisfy American appetite, but it doesn't make much of a sense. But this August there was another announcement, and it was for the first time. So it was the announcement for companies which have an experience of producing at least 1 million of small UAVs. And there are just 3 countries in the world which has experience in producing more than 1 million UAVs, which is China, Russia, and Ukraine. So for us, it was obviously not much of a competition. But if we are looking at the point of the customer, it doesn't make much of a sense, because what United States government would actually receive, it would, staff certain warehouse with 1 million of these UAVs, which become outdated like within a month from the delivery date. So we see that still the approach is very much from the old ages. We can be happy with, because we can make revenue because of this. But it still means that the thinking in US military is still from the old times. How you see this, and do you think it would change? So US at the end of the day is the most innovative country in the world, usually.
Well, it has to change, because you've demonstrated that the old system of procurement can't pace the threat. So we will have to change many of our procurement rules. And I think what you're seeing Secretary Hegseth do is press for more innovation, quicker contracting, simpler solicitations and procurement, so that we can start to create a model that would model against your technology. We will get there. I think one of the things I do want to say is that the success of Ukraine against the Russian Black Sea Fleet and the drone warfare, the asymmetric on asymmetric warfare, is not indicative of all future warfighting. There will still be major navies against major navies, major armies against major armies. And so we don't want to fall into the trap of thinking that 21st century warfare is now defined by drones on drones. Because it simply isn't the case. And we know that. But at the same time, we need to be able to work inside of the innovation cycle. So with the advent of AI and the advent of autonomous systems, and those are the 2 things I think about the most, it will completely change how we develop technology. And I think the Department of Defense wants to become more innovative. We've done this before. If anyone of you know of InQtel or DIUX, we created these entities in the government because we knew that 20 years ago, the private sector was ahead of us in innovation. Silicon Valley was more innovative than the Department of Defense. It used to be the opposite 50, 60 years ago. most of the innovation.
It was Department of Defense who
Would
started
develop.
Silicon Valley. I'm sorry,
Correct.
so it's
And
not
then
the other way
Silicon
around.
Valley became the host of innovation, and we worked very hard to attract Silicon Valley to the Department of Defense, and we're still not there, because even their culture of procurement is different than ours. So it is incumbent upon the U.S. military and NATO to change its rules to accommodate this technology, not the other way.
But then what to do with the resistance of the large players? Because basically this industry, and especially in the United States, it's so well controlled by the professional lobbyists and established connections with these large companies. It's so easy. All contracts are extremely long term, with huge budgets. So this disruption, how it can stand this type of competition?
Well, you've even met companies that are more innovative than Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, companies that are just as unhappy as you are about the big monopolistic defense industry, such as Sierra Nevada or GTS. I mean, they're very innovative, and they can produce things much cheaper than Boeing or Lockheed Martin. And I think there'll be an opportunity to kind of push the old defense industry out of the way in many of these areas. They also, let's not forget, we're going to be replenishing artillery shells. We're going to be rebuilding the defense industrial base. There is a lot of investment that needs to happen from this war for NATO. And one of the things that the president was able to do was get NATO to go from 2% of its GDP to 5% of its GDP commitment to NATO. That is a large chunk of money. And what that money wants to be obligated to is new technology. So you kind of have this situation where NATO wants to invest in future warfighting. They have all this money now. So what we want to do is create the ability for that money to be invested in the innovative technologies. And I think we'll get there. I know President Trump has been putting a lot of pressure on the Defense Department, or Department of War now, I apologize, to become innovative in contracting, in procurement, in solicitations, and find a way to, he'll be the first one to say, I don't like Boeing and Lockheed because they charge too much for things. I mean, you've watched him press Boeing on Air Force One procurement, on jet airplanes. I mean, he's his own contracting officer. And so he's
should we put our production in Qatar?
Well, so it's interesting. So the Middle East, and I spend a lot of time there, and we've actually hosted your company there in Bahrain. And the Middle East knows that what Russia has developed has been, in many ways, developed by Iran, China, North Korea. So it's not just Russia. It's being developed by all of these countries. And particularly the asymmetric nature of drones is what Iran has now as its primary weapon system. And so the GCC countries and Egypt and Jordan, they all want to be able to defend their countries from the asymmetric threat. So they will be the ones that will be most innovative in bringing your technology of unmanned systems or counter unmanned systems. And again, I always think about the biggest missing piece to this is data, and how we take data and use it in the battlefield in real time. And one of the things that when I came back to America after visiting his factory, I was telling the folks in Washington that one of the things that the Ukrainian companies do so well that we don't do well is measures of effectiveness. So in our country, it's all measures of performance. How many missiles did I shoot? How many planes did I fly? We can talk about that all day. And how much money did I spend to do that? What Ilya's company and many of the other Ukrainian companies do is measures of effectiveness. They understand why every sortie worked, why certain sorties did not work, what failed. And then they're able to fix that failure very quickly. And so I think from a concept perspective, we have a lot to learn from the Ukrainian ability to modify, to change, and to learn much of what the Russians were doing. I think the question about China components is very true, but moreover, it's all commercial off the shelf. So even if you were to stop China, the Russians would find another way to build these drones. And I remember talking to the head of defense tech in Ukraine. I said, what's the one thing we could do that would most help you right now? He said, stop the Russians from being able to buy U.S. parts for their drones. So many of the Russian drones are full of components that are commercial off the shelf that come from companies in America. So we have to be able to continue to support Ukraine, but stop Russia's ability to use our stuff. And that's a big problem right now.
No, I fully agree with this, but I think it's a separate issue. I want to touch something which is quite close to this, but from also the different angle, is the question of Europe. Because of this tariff war, European Commission made a deal to buy more of US military equipment for Europe. And actually committed quite a lot of money for this. But United States currently cannot provide this type of innovative technologies, and many of, especially Eastern European generals, they say we need those drones because that's was just demonstrated. That's the only way how we can deter a potential aggression from the Russian army. So we don't need any more tanks, you know, or stuff like that. We need more drones. Do you see the contradiction there, or maybe it's vice versa, a window of opportunities if then Ukraine companies would start their production in the US and become American producers?
So, right, 2 to 5% of the GDP is a very, very large number. And to your point, they want to buy the latest technology with their money. But they also have to rebuild 155 artillery shell factories, and they have to build the industrial base back. And one of the biggest lessons learned is NATO depleted much of its resources on this war. And that's just this war. So we have to resource the future wars as well as the current war. And if I'm in Latvia or Lithuania right now, I would be very concerned about Putin. So we have to do two things at the same time. We have to replenish the conventional arms, which are very important to the other European nations. At the same time, we have to open up the ability to develop the innovative technology. And what I believe the president is saying is, I will commit more U.S. content to NATO. I will unshackle NATO's ability to share that content with Ukraine. And this is, I think, his way of politically navigating the war. Because remember, he won the election on getting out of wars, not keeping endless wars. Now, we can talk for the rest of the time about where are we with that, and I'm happy to do that. But I think for now, what he's trying to do is rebuild the industrial base as fast as we can, because we don't know Putin's next move. But we do know this: we are very much undersupplied right now in scale, in basic artillery shells, bullets, ammunition, uniforms. I mean, the basics. We are under scale. So we have to think about that, and at the same time plan the next war. We tend to always buy for the last war. We tend to always resource what we thought we did last time. So now we're trying to do both. And I do think, if I was talking to President Zelensky right now, I would say you should do everything you can to open up your technology through the U.S. to the international market, because I think you're more protected that way than just going out to the international market. So that's what I think our goal will be over the next 3 to 6 months.
Well, as you know, we're here totally on the same page, but when President Trump recently was saying that, okay, Ukraine is to buy 400 billion US of military equipment from the United States, and we are to buy 50 billion worth of these drones from Ukraine. What did he mean?
Well, I think he's trying to set the conditions for the deals. And
No, because we are asking then Pentagon guys, and it's like we have.
Why are you selling more equipment to Ukraine? He is going to push them very hard, and I think you're watching, as we like to say, the aircraft carrier turns very slowly, and he's trying to turn it like a speedboat. So we will see how this goes, but he is very much on top of your strategy, and he wants it to be a two-way deal. He wants it to be where we sell things and buy things together, and build out our industrial bases. I co-hosted the Ukraine Reconstruction Summit last week, and we talked a lot about this, and that I want Ukraine. Ukraine's IP and can follow the rule set of America. This is not easy, as you know. You have been doing this for a year and a half or 2 years in America. We have to come up with a way that my number one concern is protecting the IP of these 2,000 drone companies, because those monopolistic big companies will gobble them up, steal their IP, leave them with nothing.
Obviously.
So the enemy is actually the defense industrial base.
Mhm.
At the same time, I think we will come up with a procurement strategy, probably through our special forces, probably through the special forces or JSOC, or maybe even the intelligence community, because they can move much faster than, say, big Army or big Navy. So I think you'll see a trade and procurement this year. Not to scale, but the first real procurement of Ukraine technology through the special forces community. But I still think it requires President Zelensky to do some things on his end to make that happen.
I think they are happening. Okay, so we will open the floor to the questions. And, okay, who will start? Then you. We need the mic.
We've been talking a lot about asymmetric types of responses. If Ukraine actually had access to a NATO standard air force, and I'm not talking about just planes, I'm talking about NATO pilots maintained by NATO crews, dropping NATO munitions on certainly Russian occupied territory and potentially even Russian territory. How significantly would that change the situation on the battlefield?
I've been on the record. I've been on the record on this for 2 years. We asked Ukraine to fight a war that we would never fight ourselves. The U.S. military would not fight what is only can be known as a combined arms campaign, which is what's happening right now. We would have never fought that war without air cover, without significant forward deployed air cover. And what we've really done is asked Ukraine to fight a war we would never fight. So I think what you're going to see, hopefully, is more support in the traditional way that you're describing. Will you see NATO pilots flying in Ukraine airspace? Possibly. I think we should still go back to a no-fly zone. I mean, if you were to ask me, one of the things we should have done before the war started, we said, we're putting a no-fly zone in place. And we could do that without flying into Russian airspace. We could even do that without flying in Ukraine airspace. But that's something NATO could have done. But again, the NATO countries and the United States at the time did not want to commit to the very challenge they asked Ukraine to fight, which is a war we would have never fought. So let's see how, as this thing drags on, and it will drag on, this is not going to end in the next week or two. And I talked a lot about this, about the ceasefire. I don't think the ceasefire is a good idea, because to me the ceasefire just lets Putin rearm, and I don't think Putin could take that back to his own country. So when we were all watching in Alaska that we thought there was going to be this ceasefire, and Trump was saying ceasefire, I don't think he thought through what a ceasefire is versus what a peace agreement is. And so we're going to go through that. But I would hope that if this drags on much longer, that we start to commit more and more of our NATO resources. And remember, the United States is part of NATO. So we could say, look, we will resource the NATO countries to fight the war with U.S. equipment. So there are lots of ways for us to be innovative about supporting what I think may become necessary, which is what you're describing.
I'm just so sorry. I would quickly add to this question, because I think before we go somewhere else, there was this recent attack on Poland, and yeah, no, right, but today was different, because today it was MiG-30 31s in Estonia airspace, and that's the different story. I don't want to go right now in a more general, like, geopolitical security discussion. I want to stay on the technology. So there was an attack by 21 drones originally, and the response was with F-35s and F-16s, and the result was that out of these 21 drones, they shot down like 4, I believe, and they did more damage with the missiles they shoot on those drones rather than drones did themselves. They were totally technologically not ready for this. Neither anti-missile defenses, nor detection, nor nothing. It's totally wasted. And the thing is that what we see in Ukraine is also, it's just inefficient. Nobody in Ukraine is firing sidewinder missiles on Shahed drones. It doesn't make any sense. So when do you think NATO would be actually ready to confront this type of threats?
They are developing counter drone systems as fast as they can, because they know that right now you don't want to shoot down a $10,000 drone with a $1 million missile and miss it, right? So this obviously isn't going to work. I think what Putin is doing is pressing the envelope on NATO right now, purposely. Estonia, Poland, Latvia. He's pressing the limits to see where he can start his negotiation of a peace deal. I think right now we have no answer for Russian drones in NATO countries. So counter drone systems are probably being developed as fast as drones are being developed. And there are lots of interesting technologies, as you know, that are being developed to counter the drone program. The Patriot systems, the large surface-to-air missile systems, are a thing of the past in large part. So I would expect that if they're not spending a large chunk of their money on countering drones, then they're probably not thinking about what they should be doing.
Again, I'm sorry, but on this thing, one of the reasons why Ukraine was relatively slow in developing anti-drones, counter-drone system, was that because the industry is very much privately driven, so they want flashy results. When you develop a drone which kills the enemy soldiers or blows the refinery or does the attack on Kremlin, everybody is saying like, wow, that's cool. When you are doing something which is like counter drone, nobody sees it, because nobody can understand that, you know, you maybe saved a lot of lives of your own citizen, you know, but it's not so flashy, and that's why it was significantly behind. Basically, it's just this year Ukraine started to develop this kind of solution. But that's where the government should come in, and that's where the Western government should come in and make a financial incentive to do this. But right now, I don't see any signs of this, or maybe I'm wrong.
I think it's happening. I mean, I certainly see the defense industry talking a lot about counter UAS systems. We were already developing them in the Persian Gulf because we were being attacked by unmanned systems from Iran or unmanned boats from Iran. And so we were developing counter UAS systems. And again, I think the concept of what we call Q to kill, from where it takes off to where you find it, you classify it as a threat, and you kill it, requires all of those aspects of the technology. And I think we're getting very close.
Will it be part of the Golden Dome?
It will be part of the Golden Dome, and I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things that we're working on that complements this so well is what we're calling a mesh network. I mean, if you think about traditional IT systems, which are everywhere, right? Telecommunication portals. What we want to use is that infrastructure with new sensors on them, such as acoustic sensors or LiDAR or other sensors that can be counter-drone. So you're going to see the Golden Dome is developing compute at the edge and power at the edge. But what we want to do is take advantage of existing systems as fast as we can. So I think counter UAS will be, I know it is a large part of the Golden Dome, which again has a lot of resources. We want to position ourselves to fund these technologies with that kind of money, because ultimately developing the network of Q to kill has to be done. And right now, as you said, it's very much tactical, force on force. And what we need to be developing is more of a global picture. And I know your company's involved in some of this, and we've got U.S. companies doing the same thing.
Sorry for keeping you waiting.
Well, thank you for your explosive presentation and talk. That was great. I think you've answered most of my question. Anti-drone stuff. 1, 2, 3. So what are your counter-drone current systems? And how effective are they?
Engineering, in software, Anduril and others not working is because of radioelectronic warfare of Russian Federation, which is the most sophisticated in the world, and which is extremely efficient. And even with some like pretty sophisticated technologies of United States that were introduced to Ukraine, like switchblades, you know, Ukrainians at the end of the day stopped using them because they're inefficient because of radioelectronic warfare. So Ukrainian systems are way more resilient. But all this stuff is quite cheap. So you rather do a very distributed production. So all those companies that I was talking about in Ukraine, they have a very distributed production across the country. They have dozens of production sites, and usually they are in some underground locations, literally in the garages, you know, in some very weird places which you would never guess. Small piece here, small piece there, and then you can produce the stuff. The warehouse is also like very distributed. So the defense would be more expensive rather than, you know, distributing this stuff. So it's that's why only this year actually Ukraine started doing defensive technologies, as I said.
Thank you very much. Just
The mic.
should I pass it to him? Yours.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then what we
How, in terms of weapons and technology, how has corruption in Ukraine hindered their ability to, you know, get the necessary equipment that they need? And what is your sense on how the administration is, you know, handling that? I mean, I don't want to pick on Ukraine, single it out, you know, but corruption has long been an issue there, and I'm just wondering if that's carried over to their warfighting effort.
Well, that's probably also for me, and then yeah, I start and then you will say. Yes, you see, the drones industry and all this like innovative technologies, it's very much like civil society, which nobody wants to mess with. You know, because the noise, you know, the pushback would be too much, and that's why this area is relatively clean. Obviously, there are also some issues, and those issues more they related to okay, some companies may be treated more favorably than others, but you know, it's not so significant. And I know people who are like committed enemies of the presidential administration in Ukraine, Zelensky, and still they're getting huge procurement allocations for the technologies that they do. And you know, if before the large-scale invasion for all decent Ukrainians and representatives of Ukrainian elites, you know, it was usual to have some restaurant of his own. Right now, it's usual to have a drones company of his own. You know, that's what everybody does, and it's working. Obviously, there are issues because the war, lack of transparency, some people are using it for their benefit, but probably not in the innovation space.
My personal opinion is that the corruption is vastly overblown when it comes to fighting this war. There was a DoD IG report maybe a year ago or so, and the headline read, $1 billion is missing in support to the Ukraine war. But then as you read down, of 44 billion, and this was in the first 6 months of the war when we abandoned our embassy, so we had no ability to do anything other than flood equipment in to fight the war. And by a U.S. standard, that's pretty damn good. I mean, I will tell you right now, I could point around this town, there's billions of dollars missing in this town. So,
Really? No, I didn't mean to pick on.
but I'm just saying that no, it's
It's not like the president.
in the defense procurement world. I mean, a country that's fighting what we were unsure of would be a 10-day war or a 3-year war. We flooded the system with equipment, with hardware, with everything we could provide, and the accounting of that was non-existent because we abandoned our own embassy, which would have been the normal checks and balances that we would have provided. So I think that part of it is vastly overblown. I would add, though, that the corruption in the system is still there. I think it's at a lower level. I think at the highest levels, it's been really addressed quite effectively. A country at war, you know, is trying to survive, and maybe the accounting systems aren't keeping up with the procurement. But again, the whole nature of this war is one of commercial off-the-shelf build it quickly, resource it fast. And again, there's a three-front war happening in Ukraine. Obviously, the Russian military attacking Ukraine. There are the Putin sympathizers that have been there for years, and Putin has had them there long before this war began. And then there's just the sheer attempt by a democracy to become more westernized while it's at war. And I think it's been a phenomenal evolution of fighting all three fronts at the same time. And what you're going to see is many of the state-owned enterprises of Ukraine will become more private-led enterprises. So that's why I focus so much on rebuilding the Ukraine industrial base, because I want it to be part of that Western standard. Because this very problem of selling into the international market will run up against this corruption analogy, whether it's real or not. So we have to address it head on and address it aggressively. But in my opinion, it's vastly overstated in terms of the actual dollars going into the hands of the warfighter.
Does privatization inherently decrease corruption, you think?
Becoming more of a free market enterprise and a Western free market enterprise by its very nature will decorrupt the system. And that's why I'm so focused on what I call winning the war by winning the peace. And I wrote an article on this. And to me, you win the peace by economic entanglement between the West and Ukraine. And Ukraine certainly has a lot to give to the West. But we want to set the conditions so that corruption doesn't become the limiting factor. I've listened to countless J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs discussions about forming a Ukrainian Reconstruction Bank or Ukrainian Reconstruction Fund, and all this money that's going to come into Ukraine, except for the war, and except for corruption, and except for this and that. They're not really actually trying to create a reconstruction plan. It's up to the private sector, in my opinion. And with this NATO increase in money, I want to take advantage of that to help westernize Ukrainian defense industrial base, which I think is, by its very nature, will remove these false barriers to entry of corruption. So I do think the private sector and the rigor and the discipline of the private sector and making money, right, can get rid of corruption, and or at least reduce corruption to a Western scale.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I kind of have two questions. I remember I've been following the war since it started, and I remember reading about drones being used to support FPV drones that had like signal repeaters to help extend the range of FPVs so they could go far beyond what they were originally capable of. And nowadays we're seeing a lot of fiber optic drones. Do you believe that this particular innovation signals to observers who that can develop more advanced like electronic warfare systems and capabilities, that autonomous drones are much more plausible? And additionally, kind of a second question, how do you think Ukraine can circumvent this problem? Because now we're going, it almost kind of feels like we're taking a step back a little bit from some of the more advanced capabilities and kind of going, well, if we just attach this cable, they can't hack it anymore, or they can't jam it anymore. So, and we're seeing now drones that originally had longer range capabilities now being more limited to how much fiber optic cable can we attach onto it. And additionally, because we now have to attach this cable, now we have to make the drones bigger so they can fit the same amount of payload, or vice versa, or sacrifice payload.
Yeah, and Ilya, let me hand the mic to you in a second, but one of the things we did in the war in Afghanistan was we created, persistent airships that were connected by fiber, not to replace autonomous systems, but to augment them, because there are certain missions, particularly persistent stare, surveillance missions, that can be done because you can move more data on the fiber optic cable than you can through autonomous systems. So what we learned in Afghanistan, where we would put an unmanned system that was cabled at 10 or 20,000 feet and it would sit there all the time. And what that allowed us to do in the war on terror was to create a faster kill cycle. So if you're looking for the IED maker in Afghanistan, and they're all driving Vespas, and they're all wearing the same clothes, and the guy ditches himself into some building, and then he comes back out 2 days later, you have to start over again. But if I can create this persistent intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance that builds up a database, then the more autonomous systems can be more effective. So I don't think it's an either or. I think it's more about how we evolve the mission to go from that cue to that kill more effectively. And I think that the fiber optics is allowing us to do that. But it certainly won't replace the autonomous systems. And the last thing I'll say on autonomous systems, everybody's so nervous about, oh, you removed the man in the loop, and now this drone could go kill anybody it wants. Not really true. I mean, very effectively, very easily, you create a kill box, and you say, anyone that's in that kill box is a bad guy. A tank, an artillery rocket system. So autonomous systems, what they allow you to do is to get through the EW problem that the Russians have. So their EW problem is or their capability is so effective. So by having an autonomous system that doesn't need a man in the loop, and I can fly it to a position without any support from anybody, and then it can turn on its sensors, and it can operate within that box with certain rule sets, then I think that's where autonomy works quite well.
I agree on the autonomy, but in general, this problem that you are raising, the problem of a shield and the sword, that's like eternal problem in all the defense technologies. What was happening in Ukraine? Russia traditionally had a superb radioelectronic warfare, and Ukraine from one side was inheriting some from the Soviet Union, but it didn't produce any at the very beginning. But because of the private nature of the industry, so Russian technologies were very concentrated, heavyweight armored trucks based devices, which were limited in numbers, while Ukrainians produced a lot of decentralized, maybe not as sophisticated, but enough to disrupt relatively primitive drones at the very first stage of war, and that totally neutralized Russia's offensive capabilities of what they had while preserving Ukrainians. That's how Russian army came first with fiber, which was really their first major innovation in this area, and that's where Russians were first, ahead of Ukrainians. Secondly, Russia started to use more larger heights of their drones, not going so low when they become affected by the radioelectronic warfare of Ukrainian army. And because Ukraine doesn't have the anti-missile defenses that shoot high, then they were defenseless in front of Orlans and Lancets, the drones that fly high. And even Shaheds they start to put at a larger height, so they are immune from radioelectronic warfare. Now again, Ukrainians came with their own solution and also started producing the same fiber, but it's not the solution that solves all the problems. And if we are thinking about, say, ISR capability, fiber would not be used in this. You can use it in the different configuration, and that's what U-Forces is produces, having the same quadrocopter, which is connected by the cable to the ground, which basically like a tower, sits on one position, but is not as efficient as the fixed wing aircraft, which could be for the whole day, somewhere there up in the sky. So fiber is patching certain needs. Ukraine right now is at peers with Russia, but it would be more new innovation coming in. It's like always happening.
Thanks again. It's incredible to hear you all's insights. I'm kind of stuck on the making money part. I don't quite see, from a private financing perspective, how you do project a return on investment, an ROI, when it sounds like Ukraine is pretty much its own market. You're consuming what you produce for your defense. So where is the excess capacity that you can outsell to a market in order to start to have a profit margin?
I know you have a good answer as well. Well, the market is so undervalued for what Ukraine is doing right now. Cyber warfare, unmanned systems. The money's sitting on the sideline waiting to invest in Ukraine technology. There's just limits to do it right now. So the investable market will export from Ukraine in a large way. Some of the things that we're focusing on through investment is data. I mean, my big focus is AI and building AI systems that can understand and become predictive and learn from all the unbelievable information that's being collected by these unmanned systems and developed. So I think the investment opportunity in non-kinetic space, and what I mean by that is electronic warfare, counter UAS systems, cyber warfare, AI development at scale, hyperscale. I work on nuclear power for AI. That's as a class of capability, because I know that the advances in AI will change completely the investable market using the drones. The drones will become sensors and nodes to a much larger landscape of collection of data in real time. So I think, I've said this before, I think Ukraine is going to be an economic miracle in terms of investable opportunities beyond the things we talk about, such as minerals, but in the human capital of AI that they have created. Every one of these drone capabilities can be re-engineered to do non-military things, almost probably 10 to 1. And so what I think the investable market will be is in the human capital, in the ingenuity, in the data that they have collected and what they have learned that will go far beyond unmanned systems. So hopefully that kind of gets into how I see the profit making.
And is your predicate that the Ukraine can do it cheaper than, say, the U.S. developing its own capability, or Denmark, or et cetera, et cetera? I mean, where is their competitive edge outside of the Ukraine? Selling outside of the Ukraine.
So, well, the competitive edge is that they're doing things that the market can't do right now, in terms of development cycles, spiral development, lessons learned, building new systems, getting them back in the hands of the warfighter. The concept of what I call pacing the technology and pacing the threat are things that Ukraine is uniquely able to do that we could not do. And much of that is coming from the fact they're fighting for their own survival, but a lot of that comes from what I believe to be the culture of the Ukrainian engineering skills. I mean, much of these skills resided in Ukraine before the war. A lot of AI companies from Ukraine weren't in Ukraine. They were developing other things, and they came home to re-engineer their AI capability into supporting their country. So I think that Ukraine is uniquely positioned to what they're doing. Now we have to scale it and protect the IP.
And just real quick, what about chips? Where are the chips? Where are you getting? I would assume some of the unique value added is in the actual circuitry, not just assembling these things.
Right. Like, if you mean by circuitry, the control devices, telecom devices, then you're right. Yes, we do produce our own communication stuff and communication protocols and jamming, anti-jamming, spoofing and anti-spoofing. And there is a lot of innovation there. But obviously, Ukraine does not produce its own chips and stuff like that. It's using ready-made stuff. But it's like the same thing. Like Cisco is not producing their own chips, you know, but producing the routers. The same thing is with what Ukrainians are doing in this regard. But I wanted to come back on your original question, and there is one answer which is kind of on the surface and very easy to see. Is Ukraine's competitive advantages, obviously, you know, price performance, agility, and above everything, battleground experience. And these are the three things where Ukraine is unparalleled. But my answer is that there is something which is actually bigger than all three of this. Ukraine right now is a true disruptor of the defense technologies, because Ukraine can move to providing peace as a service and war as a service. It goes beyond providing the products. And that's why I was stressing this thing about the first in the world unmanned system forces as part of Ukrainian military. That's a step in that in that direction, because at the end of the day, what the country wants security. In the time of peace, it wants to create to have deterrence opportunity, which can be changed quickly enough to match the threat that the country is facing, to deter that threat. And that's what Ukraine can do, because Ukraine can easily scale up the number of drones, upgrade them to match the technical capabilities of the adversary, scale down when it's not needed, you know, put something to sleep. Right now we are working with Eastern European nations to develop drones capabilities for their territorial defense forces, so for amateur paramilitary groups, you know, just residents of the areas which are next to the border, so that they can have these drones in their backyard and they would be activated automatically, centrally, you know, in case the threat arrives. And that's what we call as peace as a service. At the time of war, it's the same thing. We are not operating with Ukrainian military in terms of how I was mentioning Department of Defense, say, like, give us 1 million drones. Nobody is asking, you know, give us 1 million drones. They're asking us, you know, how many missions per night you are ready to fly, how many armored vehicles you're ready to destroy, how many enemy military personnel you are ready to destroy, you know, what is the area that you are capable of patrolling. That's the service that is being provided, and that's a true innovation in this thing. And if you know how the investment industry is working, it always appreciates particularly this thing, the transition from the product model into a service model. It results in tenfold jump in the valuation of the companies who are able to provide this kind of thing, and that's what Ukraine can actually bring to the market.
Hello.
Thank you, and I'm super happy to be here because, first of all, I'm a Chinese dissident, so it's very good to be here. You know, it's a place built by Russian dissident. I'm also a co-founder of an AI drone company. So we are trying to develop some business in Ukraine. At the moment, we have an entity there. We have a representative there. So you mentioned about the AI drone and the autonomous system in Ukraine. I think it's very true because that's a very unique advantage of Ukraine, because they can do a very quick iteration cycle. Like even a lot of like American company in California, they're not waiting, they are not planning to sell their stuff to Ukraine, but they send their prototype to test it to Ukraine. to have a title of battle proven, or to just simply test it to iterate their hardware design. So that's not something could be achieved at the moment in the U.S. And I was just thinking that there should be a good standard to evaluate whether a U.S. AI drone company is successful or not, is to see if they can enter Ukrainian market. Because at the moment, a lot of not a lot, I don't even think any American drone company would be able to enter like a Ukrainian market. And we actually spoke with several U.S. startup in a few months ago, and some of them just saying that Ukrainian are underfunding, they don't have money, blah, blah, blah. But their drone, the problem is too expensive, like 20K, 30K, and this is a government market in the U.S. and the government are not really sensitive to the price. The Pentagon, DHS will buy it anyway. It's kind of like reminds me the thermal camera market in the U.S. Like if you go to Amazon and search it online, most of the thermal camera are made in China, in civilian market. And there are a few American thermal camera manufacturers in the U.S., but the reason why people buy in the U.S., like most of them, is trying to meet like NDAA compliance, so that's why it's very expensive. And they're not be able to, they are not competitive in the civilian market, which makes they cannot reduce their marginal cost per unit. So so that's and regarding the optical fiber drones, because we have some feedbacks from the frontline unit in Ukraine, and what they are complaining now is like the first is about the production capability. The production is that's not enough, so they have to import it from China, and that make the whole process being very complicated and slow. And the second is the range is too short, so sometimes they have to send the drone operator very close to the zero line and put them on a very dangerous ground. And regarding the corruption, I'm not sure if you have mentioned this yet. The Brave One platform. So, would you really think that Brave One platform helped to eliminate the corruption issues? And second is about the chips. So what we know so far is like most of the drone stuff in Ukraine are still import from China. Actually, so far, vast majority of them. And for AI drones. The chips used on AI drone are generally not advanced high-end chips like NVIDIA, but low or mid-end chips. And the major supplier and the manufacturer of those chips are still China. So would you see that, is it even possible for Ukraine or any other alternative supplier outside of China would be able to somehow set up a factory or facility in Ukraine? And that drove my last question is that in the past few months, we also heard that there's a lot of like Chinese drone manufacturers contact us saying that if it's possible to move their facility to Ukraine. Because, well, Beijing regime, essentially totalitarian regime, pro-Russia, of course, but it not means that every single Chinese pro-Russia. There are still a lot of people trying to move their stuff to Ukraine. And of course, there are also some people just simply trying to make money. So would you see that it's possible for some Chinese drone manufacturer to move their facility to Ukraine in the near future? Thank you.
There was a lot of questions you asked. Thank you for all of those, and I'll try to get a couple that you. So Brave One as an incubator is a very smart way to bring technology or ideas into the market at a very low price point to see if, in fact, I mean, being battle tested is a good thing. In my time in Ukraine, and I would see these U.S. drone companies come over. And I'd always say, why is your drone going to be, because you bring ITAR compliance, you bring foreign military sales restrictions, and you bring, like you said, the government procurement mindset to the problem that's not a government problem. It's a commercial problem. So this is something we have to work through. But I would talk to these U.S. drone companies, and they all thought they had like the drone that was going to win the war. And you would realize that, no, they don't. And whatever you have built, probably Ukraine's already doing it better. I did run into a couple companies, and there was one by a young American who had a drone company that had been invested in. He was in Ukraine, and I was talking to him. I said, well, why is your drone so special? And he goes, I don't really know. I mean, it's like, and I go, well, it doesn't sound very special to me. And he goes, I think part of it is because I'm the world champion drone racing pilot. which I didn't even know there was a thing called drone racing, but apparently it's a big thing. And so his skill was piloting the drone.
Yeah.
And I think, so when you start to look for where we could bring things into the market, it's that concept of drone operations or AI advancing the operations. I think that's where you're going to see, but for now, whatever you think you have that could help Ukraine win, they probably already have it. So let's just put money into what they already have to win the war first, then we'll sort the rest of it out. Because all we would bring right now is a heartache and a headache and too much money required to bring our system to a country that's fighting this war. And the last answer to, or the last question that you asked that I would answer, I certainly wouldn't want any Chinese companies in Ukraine. And I will also say that I think that this is exactly what China is hoping, that there will be a stalemate, that there'll be a protracted war, and that this war of attrition will open up the opportunity for Chinese state-owned enterprise companies to come into the market, be it critical minerals or be it the drone technology. I certainly wouldn't want the Chinese to get what Ukraine has right now. And I think a big part of what we're developing is making things China-proof. And it's not going to be easy, particularly with AI. So we are dead set on China-proofing everything we build. And I think Ukraine will move in that same direction.
I see. Thank you.
I would actually pick up from where you stopped, because we are with you in one boat. Me being Russian, you're being Chinese. Obviously, it raises a lot of suspicion. Especially in this industry. And the thing is that unfortunately, these suspicions, they justified. One of like my good acquaintance, Pavel Durov, of Telegram. I cannot question his personal integrity. But I would never trust Telegram as a technology, because I understand that there are many Russians there, and he cannot guarantee that none of those Russians are being recruited by FSB and reporting. So it's not a question of backdoor in the technology, it's the question of particular people who can collect the data and send it back to Moscow. And that's why when I would be facing a Chinese company, even if it is run by a dissident, well-known, verified, lie detector whatsoever, I cannot be certain that there is nobody inside the company who could provide this backdoor, unfortunately. That's the reality that we need to face, and that's one thing. The second thing is that I don't think it's a smart idea in the time of war to put any production inside Ukraine. I want, obviously, more jobs, more taxes, more revenues for Ukraine, but I would rather keep their R&D, innovation and stuff, but keep the production, the scaling capabilities outside. And make the supplies reliable, because also that would, if you're keeping it in Ukraine, that means you would definitely lose a lot of customers, which would not be certain about the reliability of the supplies. And lastly, I was mentioning it when I was speaking, is that we are very sensitive to the dependency on Chinese components. And I would say that overwhelming majority of Ukrainian companies are dependent, and overwhelming majority is thinking how to get away from this dependency. And many companies, they have a contingency plan, what would happen if Beijing would decide to turn off the supplies, and we will need to do it. And we are pretty certain that it would not result in the disruption of the industry, that we will be able to. Maybe some of the drones would become less efficient, as what the companies I am working with were testing. Usually they say we're losing like 15% of durability on the batteries. We are losing like 15% of efficiency on the rotors, but you know it's not terminal. So we still can do it. There's just no sense to do it at the moment when the supplies are there, because that makes the company less efficient, and that's it.
I see.
And I think that one of the ways to proceed is actually one of the potential large customers for Ukrainian industry is Taiwan. And the beauty of Taiwan in terms of, you know, this type of military cooperation, all countries in general, all countries that they want procure defense technologies, they want local production. There's no exception. Everybody wants it. But Taiwanese understand that because they are small, so they are vulnerable, and if they put the production in Taiwan, it can be disrupted at any moment if God forbid China attacks. That's why they are ready to put some of the production outside, and it could be in the United States. And that could be the solution to the problem that you're saying. Friends, we now hitting 8 p.m.
Thank you.
Maybe if somebody has important question, or we just go to have a private conversation and ask them privately. But then pick up the mic, please.
So I'm just curious how the Ukrainian companies are developing drones that can operate in GPS denied or jammed environments. Because if you will remember the situation with Stanislav Petrov, when he prevented the potential nuclear situation when the Soviet Soviet early warning system detected the false alarm of missile launch, and how in the modern days with AI drones actually operate in the GPS denied environments.
First of all, there are 3 different systems right now on the market, and usually these communication units, they switch from one system to another. Then they use geolocation by GPS, GSM towers. Then, you know, many systems, they have inertial coordination system, which means they're tracking where they were previously, you know, and then reconstructing the trajectory without communicating with the satellites, waiting until the moment when the communication is restored. But it's not as precise, and on the distances of hundreds of kilometers, if you're losing GPS signal, you can still like get in the range of several dozen meters, but not in several meters. System, but differences. But in general, it's the technology. That's what many people are working on, and that's again one of the key know-hows of Ukraine is actually firstly how to make it more efficient. Secondly, is how to trick the enemy to change the coordinates. Colleagues, thank you very much. I think, Michael, you were fantastic, and I think it was a very interesting conversation. I think that we will continue talking about the new defense technologies in the future, because this is something like really shaping the momentum. And I think that you know, we all may live in a different world a couple of years from now because of what we are speaking about here. We're definitely living in a different Ukraine than it was 3 years ago. Admiral, thank you very much.
brute force